Welcome to the December the 25th taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie. And we're taping this on December the 18th for the Christmas holidays. And we are so delighted to have for our history tape number 136 a very special couple to Grand Prairie, Texas. Because in the time that they have lived in Grand Prairie, Texas, they have contributed very much to the history of our city. As we said, this is our history tape number 136, and we're delighted to welcome today Mr. and Mrs. Bob Johnson. Mr. Bob, I'm glad to see you today. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Patsy, we are very delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, to open up our little history tape, we'd like for you, Mr. Johnson, to look out into your camera and tell us a little bit about your beginnings. Give us the genealogy of your family, and if you'd do that for us at this time.
Thank you. Well, I think my parents moved here in 1928. They lived north of Hanley on W.T. White Road at that time, and my daddy worked for the B.F. Goodrich Company in Dallas. He was an employee for that company for 22 years. So they bought a little farm out here south of town and decided they would get closer to their work. So on the day of the big move, my brother related to me that it was he and his brother duty to drive the team of horses and the wagon and the mule to our present location in Grand Prairie. So they left early in the morning, and it had taken all day to arrive here, and was up into the night when they got here. And they said when they looked back, the mule was gone. So I asked him if he got in any trouble, and he said, well, I don't really want to remember, so I guess maybe he did or didn't, I don't know.
All right.
But they bought a little farm out here south of town, out where Abianville Road is, but it's now known as Warrior Trail. And we lived about a half a mile off the road down there, and it was a dirt road, which was very hard to travel when it rained or got wet. And that's where I was born, in the house down there. Just if you went down South Carrier Parkway, about 100 yards off to the left there on Kirby Creek is where I was born in 1930.
Right.
And we lived there till 1939, and then we moved to Grand Prairie proper for 1 year, but Daddy didn't like the idea of farming, and he had since retired from the B.F. Goodrich Company about 1938, I believe, or somewhere in there, and was farming. So we moved to town and tried a little while, but that didn't work out. You can't feed chickens and hogs and stuff and live in town very good. So we moved back to the farm on Arkansas Lane in 1940, about 40 or 41. And that's where basically we spent the rest of our time until we were grown and married, was on Arkansas Lane.
All right, now, would you give us your father's full name, please, sir?
My father's name was Ward Calvin Johnson.
Okay, and how about your mother?
And her name was Elsie Marilla Lawhon Johnson.
Okay, how about the rest of the family? Now, we know that Mr. Bob Johnson was born in Grand Prairie in about 1930.
Right,
All
June
right.
19th.
All right, but you had brothers and sisters. We need those names and a little details about them.
Well, my three older brothers, there was kind of two sets of us children. My three older brothers were born mostly in Dallas County, I believe.
All right.
Out on Beckley Avenue and Ohio Street in that area of Dallas. And before they moved from there. My oldest brother is E.O. Johnson, and he's president of the Texas Rubber Supply in Dallas. My second brother was Ward Calvin Johnson, Jr., and he was a World War II veteran and worked for the T.B. Woods Company after his return from service. He is now deceased.
Okay.
And my third brother was Roland Johnson, and he lives in Canyon, Texas, and he's retired from West Texas State University. He taught some 20-some-odd years in West Texas State University.
Okay.
And then they started the second group of boys and girls.
All right.
And I was the oldest of that group. There was about 10 years difference, 9 years exactly, between the brother just older than I and myself. And I was the oldest of that group, and 2 years later, Bert was born, Bert Melvin Johnson. He was a Korean War veteran and highly decorated man of the service in his time in service. And then the baby of the family was my sister, Marlene Vilone Johnson was her name, and she still lives in Grand Prairie. Emery lives in Irving, and Roland lives in Canyon, Texas still.
You still have some of your folks pretty well nearby then, don't you?
Yes, I have 2 of them that's real close.
That is
that's left.
wonderful. Okay.
Bert is also deceased too, my brother
right.
from Korea's deceased.
Okay. That sounds like bringing us pretty well up to snuff for you for a few minutes. We're going to get back with you in a few minutes, but now let's go to Miss Patsy. Patsy, let's first establish your mother and father's name, and if you'd look right out into your camera here.
My father's name was Dewey Wesley Colson. My mother's name was Susie Irene Jones Colson.
Okay.
We moved to Grand Prairie in probably early 1940s. I was 6 or 7 years old at that time. My father helped build the first LTV plant, which was also known as Chance Vault at that time.
How wonderful.
Later, he went to work for the city of Grand Prairie. He was the second man employed by the city of Grand Prairie in the water department, and there he worked until his retirement some 5 years ago.
Okay. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have one sister. Her name is Joanne Braddock. She lives in Grand Prairie. She works for First City National Bank in Dallas.
Okay. All right. We've gotten you into Grand Prairie in the 1940s, but let's find out where you were born and what your family did. Where were you born, Patsy?
Well, I was born in the Britain, Venus area. My parents were farmers until we moved to Grand Prairie.
In Britain, Venus.
Yes.
And did you know that Grand Prairie almost reaches all the way to Venus in our ETJ now?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it really does. Okay. Did you go to school in the Venus area?
No, I did not. I went to school in Grand Prairie. I started school in first grade here. I happened to be one of the ones that occupied Lee Junior High for the first year when it was built. I quit school after 2 years in high school and later went back in 1975 and got my GED.
Well, isn't that splendid? Oh, that is wonderful. All right. Now, how about children?
We have 5 children.
Okay, I'd like for you to name them and tell us a little bit about each one.
Our oldest son, Brent Wayne, is president of First Continental Bank. He graduated from Texas Tech University after winning a scholarship from the G.H. Turner Scholarship Fund. Our daughter Susan is married to a minister, Reverend Mike Wisnett, and they live in Granbury, Texas.
Do they have any children?
They have 3 children.
Would you name those 3?
Their oldest daughter's name is Christy, the youngest daughter's name is Ronnie, and then their son's name is Justin.
Oh, that's right. Good.
And then Bobby Jr. lives in Grand Prairie. He works for heating and air conditioning in Arlington. They have 3 children also, Amy and Coy and Adam. Our youngest daughter, Stacy, lives in Grand Prairie and works for Service Merchandise, and she's not married. Our youngest son, Ward, lives in Grand Prairie, and he works for us in our place of business.
That's wonderful. Well, you have so many nearby, that makes it a blessing, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it makes it a full house for Christmas and Thanksgiving and all the good things, right?
Definitely.
All right.
I forgot to mention that our oldest son, Brent, has 3 children also,
All right.
Barrett, Brian, and Brooke.
All right. Would you like to name Brent's wife? We happen to know her very well. We'd like to get her in the record, and any of the other spouses that you would like to name.
Okay, Brent's wife's name is Debbie Anderson, and her parents live in Grand Prairie.
All right. They have 3 children.
They have 3 children.
Would you like to name them and tell us if they go to school in Grand Prairie?
Barrett goes to Adams Junior High. Brian and Brooke go to Eisenhower Elementary.
Oh, that's great. All right. Any of the other spouses that you want to drop their names in this?
Well, Bobby's married to Vicki Williams, and her parents also live in Grand Prairie.
All right. Sounds wonderful. All right, let's get back to Mr. Bob. Mr. Bob, when you grew up out on the farm out here south of town, tell us a little bit about the experience of a young man living on a farm in a town that was not very large, and your experiences in going to school, and where all did you go to school?
Well, I think I was very fortunate. We lived, like I say, out there on Kirby Creek, and it was a young man's dream. We had a creek running through the pasture. We had squirrels and rabbits, and we could hunt and fish, and we could roam freely. No hesitation about going anywhere out there. Everybody let you come on their land. There was no restrictions. And the only thing we didn't like was the fact that we had to walk out that half-mile dirt road to catch a school bus. And I didn't go to Florence Hill. My older brothers went to Florence Hill Elementary School.
All right.
But I never did go to Florence Hill. I rode the bus and went to Grand Prairie High School.
Okay.
And I graduated in 1947 from Grand Prairie High School.
All right. Where did you go to elementary school?
Grand Prairie High School.
And where it was the old 11-room building, grade building, right?
2 years I went to Southside. They built a little, got a little crowded up there, and so they built a little building down on Southeast 4th and Grand Prairie Road. And it was called Southside. And if I'm not mistaken, it was the 5th and 6th grades, but I can't be positive. Probably was the 4th and 5th grade.
Tell us a little bit about Southside. I've not interviewed anyone that's given us any history about Old Southside, and if you attended there, do you remember any of the teachers or anything about Old Southside School?
Yes, I remember one of my teachers was Ms. Speck.
Okay.
And I don't remember her maiden name, but I know it was Miss Speck.
All right.
And
there was not a principal at that school then? It was just...
yes, there was 4 teachers. There was 4 rooms.
Okay, 4 rooms?
4 rooms and 4 teachers, and one of them served, I guess, as a principal.
Yes.
I had one man teacher there, but I can't remember his name.
Okay, I'm
glad. If I had
to...
more time to think, I probably would have remembered it, but right now I can't think of it.
This is good to add to our history tape because we don't have anyone that's spoken of Old Southside. Okay.
Well, I don't think that school was in service for very long because they built Lee Junior High.
I see.
Shortly after that. I think probably 3 or 4 years is all that it was there, but I'm not positive. But it wasn't there very long.
All right. And after you graduated from Southside and went on back to Grand Prairie.
Well, we didn't graduate. That's just where they were holding
that was
classes.
attrition, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Tell us your graduating class for Grand Prairie High School.
Well, in 1947, I graduated in 1947.
Okay.
In fact, I have a picture here, I think, of the reunion that we had. Let me see if I can find it here.
Let's find the reunion picture.
Here it is.
Okay. All right, let's hold that up. And you know how Dirk told us to hold this up? Down just a little for our camera.
That?
Yeah, now see how good we're coming out with that? Yeah. And this is the class of 1947. And when was this one taken?
This was a reunion in 1980, around 1980, 79?
I don't remember.
That is great. All right.
We were all about 50 years old here.
All right. Would you tell us a few of the people that were in your graduating class?
There's Thomas Chenault. He is still a resident of Grand Prairie.
All right.
This is Mr. Holland, Pecos Holland. He is now deceased.
All right.
And this fellow right here, I think, is also deceased. That's I right there.
Okay.
And here's Bobby Langford. He was the fire chief of Grand Prairie. And here's John Beamont. He was the fire marshal of Dallas County.
You had a lot of firemen in that one class, didn't you?
Yeah, we had 1, 2, 3. And this fellow here, Glenn Brown, he was a fireman in Reno, Nevada.
Uh-huh.
He lives in Nevada.
Okay.
So he was a fireman there. And I think there was about 40, about half the class was there. There was 80 graduates in my class.
Okay.
In this group. And some of them have since deceased. Miss Brumley here has since deceased, and Miss Potts.
All right. Tell me this. Of your high school tenure, were you in football or track or any of? All right. Tell me about Mr. Bob when he was in high school.
You was on the school bus, or you got it good when you got home?
Oh, I see. So
sports was not real big when I was going to school for farm boys.
Yes.
Because normally we had a lot of work to do, a lot of things to do around the house, and besides that, I was too little. I didn't weigh but 118 pounds. They would have creamed me on that football team.
All right. Now, tell me, did you have a favorite teacher during your tenure at Grand Prairie High School?
Yes, probably Miss Wagner.
Miss Beth Wagner?
Beth Wagner,
okay.
Yes. She taught up there for, and also Miss Rena Height was a very good teacher, very strict.
Did you have
kiddos didn't like her too well, but boy, you learned under her.
All right. Tell me a favorite subject.
Oh, I think history was probably my favorite subject, and social studies.
Well, that's great.
I seem to enjoy those more.
Class of 1947, who was your principal at that time, or was there a superintendent? Mr. Roberts?
Mr. Roberts was my principal when I was in grade school, but he wasn't principal when I graduated.
Okay.
And I can't remember who it was.
That's all right. We'll let that strike that from the record, won't we? Okay, we're going to let you rest for just a few minutes, but now let's get back to Patsy. And Patsy, tell us about a little bit more about your schooling. Did you have any favorite teachers or any special thing that you'd like to tell us about your early school years?
Well, I also went to Southside.
Oh, you did?
Probably the last year that it was occupied before Lee opened.
Before you went to Lee?
Yes.
All right.
And I also went to high school in the old high school building.
All right.
The one that serves as tax office now.
Yes.
I liked math real well, but I didn't have a favorite teacher.
When you went to Lee, do you remember who the principal was or anyone
No,
there?
I don't.
All right. Okay.
I really don't.
Okay. Math was probably your greatest subject of all
Yes,
then.
yes.
All right. Now, Mr. Bob, tell us a little bit about how you met beautiful Patsy.
Well, there was a feed store on South Center Street.
Yes.
And me and my father used to frequent that store quite regularly. That was our day break. We'd come up there and drink a Coca-Cola or Dr. Pepper or whatever.
Yeah.
And it had a big long wooden porch in front of it there, and I would sit out there and drink my Coke. And sometimes when we'd come there early in the morning, I would see this beautiful young lady coming down the sidewalk going to school.
Uh-huh.
And I'd say, I'll bet she would make a good wife. So it wasn't long until they started coming to our church. So then I had occasion to meet her. I was too bashful to say anything to her then, but
Yes.
when she started coming to church, well, her and my sister got pretty involved. You know, they were about the same age, so
Yeah.
she got to coming out to the house, and I don't know, maybe she fell for me. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, all right. And tell me the name of this church where you happened to meet.
Calvary Baptist Church. I've been going to Calvary Baptist Church since 1936.
All right.
We were almost one of the first members to attend. We were almost charter members, but not quite.
Not quite.
We weren't a charter member. I think there was 40 some odd charter members. But my mother went to she always took us to Sunday school in church, and she started going in 1936. And I was saved in your neighborhood. My brother was holding a revival at about where 32nd Street would be now. A
Okay,
tent
down,
revival.
down near Bowles
Yep.
Memorial
just right behind
Baptist?
the old business there.
Uh-huh.
And I was saved under his lay leadership, my brother Roland. He was kind of a lay preacher in his young days.
That was wonderful. What a
Yes.
wonderful experience to have your brother to do your baptismal and,
Right.
and all of the good stuff. That's great. All right. What I need to know then, I guess, is I know how you met her and that you all married. And then what were you doing for a living about this time?
Well, I was trying to farm. I wasn't
All right.
doing very good, but I was trying.
All right.
In fact, when we got married, I had $11 in my pocket.
Uh-huh. You were rich,
I was
probably.
rich,
then.
yeah.
You bet. You bet.
So we spent $7 of it at the first night at the Cliff Towers Hotel in Dallas. We
Yes.
went over to my brother's, and he fed us. He lived in Dallas, my oldest brother, Emery, and he and his wife cooked us supper and fed us supper and congratulated us on our marriage and everything. So we spent our night at the Cliff Towers Hotel, and I never will forget it. It was November the 2nd, the next day, and when we woke up, there was about 4 inches of snow on the ground.
How exciting.
Yeah.
How exciting.
So since we didn't have any money to do very much, we went up to see my brother in Denton. The Gophers were playing ball up there that night, and I want to tell you, it was the coldest night in history.
Oh, sitting
it
out
was
at a
bitter
football
cold,
game.
yes.
Yes.
And so we went up there and spent the night with his brother, and then we come back home. We had a house on Arkansas Lane that I did prepare a place for us to live. We didn't have any running water, but we had love.
That's it. That's it. You when you have love, you can take the water
That's
or
right.
leave it, right?
Leaves a lot of
All
us.
right. And how long did you stay in this farm business?
Until 1956. Well, I worked part-time with the post office. I was a sub-rural carrier. I was sub for Mr. George Rogers and Earl Couch. Yes. And Mr. Rogers' route went north of town, and Mr. Couch's went south of town. And they were supposed to have a sub for each route, but since they couldn't keep one, well, I subbed for both of the postmen. And actually, that's what kept me from starving to death, was what I was making at the post office. And so when I graduated from high school, I still farmed. I thought I wanted to farm. I loved to farm. I loved to be around the growing plants and whatnot. And so when I graduated from high school, well, I still tried to farm, but then I wasn't doing too good sometimes, so I was staying there helping my mother and father. And then my father died in 1949. So when he died, I went to work for the post office in about 1953, I believe, full-time as a clerk. And then some positions come open on the fire department, and her father was a volunteer fireman. So he says, why don't you go down there and apply for a job at the fire department, then you can farm on your days off and you can make some more money. So I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. I'd like that. So I did. I went down and applied, took a civil service exam, passed it. Me and J.L. Johnson went to work together in September the 1st, 1955.
Okay. 1955, you went to work. You don't have any of the old pictures, 1955, when you first went to the fire department?
No, not about 1959 was
before we get into the fire department, I think we ought to show and tell this little picture that you have here and tell us about that and who that is.
All right. This is a picture of myself and my brother Bert Melvin, the brother that was in the Korean War.
Yes.
And this is a picture that that one of our neighbors took of us on the farm, on our Shetland pony with our dogs. We always had 2 or 3 dogs, you know. Every boy had to have a dog.
Yes.
So this is a picture of a Shetland pony. His name was Pacer. And he lived to be about 27 years old. And mean.
Oh.
I mean, he would bite you and throw you off and everything.
Yes.
Like any Shetland pony will do.
Yes.
But this is a picture that appeared on a national magazine, but I can't remember what national magazine. It was a Farmer Stockman or Progressive Farmer, one of those, but I don't remember which.
That's great. I'm glad we had that to show and tell today. All right, now let's get into this fire department good stuff. And let's tell our story and show our pictures at the same time.
Well, I'd like to show you something here first.
All right.
I have brought a couple of watches with me. This is a watch that my daddy had, and there's a little story behind this. In 1938, my mother and myself and my brother Bert picked up pecans. Mother was going to buy Daddy a watch. So we picked up pecans probably all of November and part of December, and she finally got enough to carry them to Dallas, and she got $28 for the pecans. Well, this watch was $38 in a hock shop, in a pawn shop. So somehow or another, she raked up $10 more and bought Daddy this pocket watch.
Beautiful.
So this is an Elgin Railroad watch, and it's kind of a prized possession of mine.
Oh, yes, I would think so, too.
Then I have another watch that my brother bought me back. When he was in the Korean War, I don't know exactly where he got this. He may have gotten it overseas, or he may have gotten it here in the States. But this is an imperial watch, and it was built in 1900. I've been headed to a man that knows watches, and he looked at the date and told me it was made in 1900.
That's exciting looking.
Yes, see it has a gold
crown, doesn't it? Yes, that is great.
So I'm very fond of those 2 articles, and these will be passed down unto my 2 of my boys.
All right, now how about this cap? Let's get this cap out. Move the watches, and let's talk about that cap a minute, shall we?
Well, this was the last cap that I wore as a fireman. It has the captain's insignia here on it.
So you ended up being a captain?
Yes, I was a fire marshal from 1960. When Bobby Langford made fire chief in 1960, well, then I made fire marshal. He was fire marshal, and he stepped up to fire chief. And when he made fire chief, I stepped up to fire marshal. And I was fire marshal for 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And but this is the last cap that I wore in service. In 1965, I busted back to captain and was captain from then until my retirement in 1986.
And that's with the Grand Prairie Fire Department.
That's Grand Prairie Fire Department.
All right, let's show and tell some of these good pictures of the fire department. Shall we do that?
Okay.
Okay.
When I was fire marshal, we had a little program going called Miss Flame.
All right.
Every year we would select a young lady from our local high school. She had to be a high school graduate. Well, she had to be in high school.
Yes.
And this is a picture of the 1965. And that's me right over here, right there. And then Susie Johnson, and then the Joyner girl was the immediate Miss Flame. And the next girl is Kenny Oldham, which is our pastor's daughter. She was first runner-up in that pageant. And then there's the fire chief, Bob Langford.
That's great. All right, how about some of these others that you have here that may have some old memorabilia?
Well, this is when I was fire marshal, we always distributed these. I thought you might enjoy seeing this. We distributed these to all the schools. They still had fire drills then. I'm not sure they still have fire drills because schools have been improved considerably. They're not as apt to have a fire, but they may still have them. I'm not for sure. But this was one of the old fire drill signal deals that we had.
Okay.
And then we always attended a lot of schools. I don't know, firemen must be dumb or something because we have to go to a lot of schools, but they're sure interesting. Here was one that we attended in 1959 at Texas A&M. This was a light duty rescue class here. And there's 2 people from Grand Prairie attended. That was me there, and that's Homer D. Wolf. If you remember
Oh,
Homer
yes.
D. Wolf, the policeman?
Yes, you bet.
He's retired from the Arlington Fire Department now. I mean,
Okay.
the police department
Police
now, I believe.
department, okay.
So that's one of the schools we attended. That was probably the best school I ever attended, was the.
Okay.
And this is just another picture of the A&M University, where that all the firemen during the fire training school. This is just a big picture, and we have several. There's John Beemit's in that, and Lewis Williams and myself, and some more.
All right.
This is a picture of the volunteers and paid men, and this was about 1958, I believe.
All right, let's hold that one up. That looks
Yes.
like a real good piece of memorabilia right there.
That's Shirley Lackey, I believe was her name, and that's the firemen, both paid and volunteer. We only had about eight or nine paid firemen then.
Okay.
Me and Bobby Langford were the first paid firemen to attain officership in the Grand Prairie Fire Department.
Oh, that's good history note.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
1959.
Okay, what else do we have?
This is a big fire we had down on Vault Manor Lumber Company. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. This is a big fire we had down at the Vault Manor Lumber Company, and that's me on the ladder there. That was a 65-foot wooden aerial ladder truck, which has now been retired, thank goodness, because it was
Kind of rackety.
kind of shaky up there on top of that ladder.
Yes, it was.
And so that was one of the big fires we had. That and Perkins Lumber, probably up until then, was the biggest fires we had.
You had. Okay.
And this is a group in about 1959 of the paid firemen.
Uh-huh.
There's about 16 there, including the fire chief. And the fire marshal was part-time. We didn't have a full-time fire marshal then. John Beeman was full-time.
That's wonderful. All right, let's get back to Patsy just a minute before we give you all the time. We have only 2 minutes left. Can you believe that our 30 minutes is evaporating? Patsy, tell us, we know that you've worked out of the home recently. Tell us if you work now or where you've worked, or give us your time.
Well, I was a homemaker until about 16 years ago, and then I went to work for Watson's Department Store in their stockroom, and now I'm an office clerk for Watson's Department Store.
Wonderful. And get to see all of the good things in Grand Prairie, Texas.
Yes, I do. I get to see all the new fashions and people, and I enjoy working there.
That is great. All right, Mr. Bob Johnson, former fire marshal, former captain, former everything in the fire department. What has it been like to be retired now? All of a sudden, you don't have all of these on calls and et cetera?
Well, I made some plans before I retired to have something to do, because I was always very active, and I didn't feel like I could just sit down and retire and not do anything. So I built me a little lawnmower shop. Well, my brother actually supplied the money, but I supervised the building and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And up at 6th and Bottom in Grand Prairie, I have a little lawnmower shop. Mm-hmm. And it
What's the name of it? So
Johnson Service Center.
Johnson Service Center. Good.
And we sell mowers, and we repair mowers and line trimmers and chainsaws and the gamut of yard tools.
That's great.
Yes.
Well, you've certainly been a wonderful influence here in Grand Prairie as a public servant through the city, and as an entrepreneur in business now.
Yes.
And at least you have your sweet Patsy working down at Watson's and all of this good stuff.
I've got one more picture here. When I was
You better hurry, we're on
When I
our
was
way.
fire marshal,
All
I coached ball teams, and this is a picture of my C.P. Wagner ball team
Oh, that
back in
is
the
great.
1960s.
In
And this is our son right here. That's Brent Wayne.
Oh,
And this
right.
is Buster, our second boy.
All right. Well, we want to thank you all for being on our show today. It's been just wonderful. We needed 2 hours, didn't we?
Thank you. It did pass fast.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.